Alrighty, folks, so we're getting ready to start World War II. Of course, I'm sure you guys know this, but World War II is also known as the Second World War, right? I've had some students get confused about that. One of the first questions I ask you is, during what years were we involved in the war? If it would stop spinning around, you can see 1941 to 1945. But if you look above, you see that World War II started in 1939, right? Even though there was fighting over in Asia and even down in Africa, I guess it's the Eurocentric nature that we date the beginning of World War II with the invasion of Poland and Britain and France declaring war on Germany on September 3rd, 1939. Now, just like in World War I, America manages to stay out. So we stay out for 2 years, actually like 2 years and 3 months or so. But just like we stayed out of World War I, America feigns, we pretend to be neutral, when actually we were definitely very pro-Allied. And as you guys will see, and this would make a great comparison, contrast question, a lot of the same things that we did in World War I that ultimately get us in World War I also get us into World War II, okay? All right, so here's your key concepts, just so you guys know that this is what we're supposed to be covering here. This is a concept you guys have seen again and again, going back to the Spanish-American War, when we have the same key concept, World War I, and now finally the last time you'll see it is World War II. So America gets involved in global conflicts. For the first time, we're not fighting in our hemisphere like we were with the Mexican War, like we were the 2 times we fought the British, okay? It propels us into a position of international power. Now, when World War II is over, y'all, there is no doubt we are not just a major power. We are one of 2 superpowers. Superpowers able to leap over other powers, able to bend the course of mighty rivers. Been still in our, no, but we are a superpower. What is the other superpower, y'all? The Soviet Union. But even they, y'all, were a big step down from us. They had lost somewhere between 20 and 30 million people. Sadly, once you lose like 10 or million people, people kind of stop counting, right? They were devastated. I was in the Soviet Union in 1986 for a while. Can't tell y'all why, or I'll have to kill you. But anyway, I was over there, and this was about, 40 years, 50 years maybe after World War II. And I virtually saw no men in their 70s. So the question is, why didn't I see any men in their 70s? I saw lots of women in their 70s because they'd all been killed. I mean, it's unbelievable, okay? Like, if you guys in this class, half of y'all would have been killed or wounded, okay? That's how bad it was. But they were still the second greatest power in the world after us, okay? Now, once again, I don't know how much you guys have time to follow the news, but this weekend there was a big debate about should we aid Ukraine or not aid Ukraine. You wouldn't have seen that debate after World War II. America, after the experiences of World War I and then finally World War II, we decided, y'all, that we had to be involved in world affairs. And we will be the leader of a new organization called the United Nations, whose job is to try to keep the peace. All right, now, here's some dates, and I always make the old joke. These are more dates than Mr. D had in high school. Okay, 1939, you guys should know, because 1939 is when at least we say that World War II began, when the Germans invaded Poland, at least the western part of Poland. The British and French were committed to aid Poland. They gave Hitler 24 hours to leave. Hitler refused. They gave him another 24, and on September 3rd, the British and the French declared war on the Germans, and we had World War II. Now, another date all Americans should know is December 7th, 1941. All right? In fact, that's the beginning of a very, very famous speech of our president, and you'll see that speech, at least part of it, in just a sec here, where President Roosevelt said, "Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which shall live in infamy, and I'll go through that quote later on in another slide. The United States was suddenly and deliberately attacked by the air and naval forces of the Empire of Japan. Okay? So Pearl Harbor, y'all, was our base out in the middle of the Pacific, out in the Hawaiian Islands. Okay? And the U.S. enters the war as a result of this. Now, I have a lot of students who ask a very intelligent question. They'll say, all right, Mr. D, I understand why we were fighting the Japanese because they attacked us at Pearl Harbor. But how the heck did we start fighting the Germans? Well, you'll see that we were aiding the British and the French, and ultimately there is a kind of a non-declared war between us. But Hitler, y'all, was an ally of the Japanese and the Italians. Now, the terms of the alliance said only if we, the United States, attacked, or if Japan was attacked, would he be required to help them. Now, Japan obviously wasn't attacked. Japan did the attacking. But Hitler, y'all, very arrogant, you know, I guess he figured, hey, we were already basically at war. Hitler, a couple days after Pearl Harbor, goes ahead and declares war on the United States, and so does Italy, okay? Really stupid decision, but he goes ahead and does it. Now, another date, and hopefully either Monday or maybe hopefully Monday, you guys will see an excerpt from the movie Saving Private Ryan. I was working on that a few minutes ago, getting that set up. But that is the invasion called D-Day. It's June 6, 1944. Now, on that date, United States, Canadian, and British forces landed on the peninsula called Normandy. It sticks up out of France, and the goal was to first liberate France from the Nazis who had taken it over, to liberate Belgium and the Netherlands or Holland, and finally to go into Germany and to get rid of Hitler, right? So that was the invasion. D-Day, by the way, the term D, a lot of people think it's got like Death Day, Demolition Day, Destruction Day. No, D-Day stands for D as in day, because when you're writing up your orders, you just put down D-Day. You don't know when the attack's going to be. You just put that in, so if the date changes, you don't have to go through and change every document. Just like there's an H hour and an M minute, D stands for that, okay? Now, the last date you need to know is 1945. That is when the war ends both in Germany and in Japan. Now, spoiler alert, Hitler commits suicide in the end of April 1945. His successor, Admiral Donitz, only stays in for a little bit longer, and then he surrenders. Now, everybody imagined, oh my gosh, now we're going to have to invade Japan. It's probably going to take a year or more, because the Japanese, y'all, they were tenacious, man. They were tough. They did not surrender. They would kill themselves or launch an attack, a crazy suicidal attack at the last second rather than surrender. So America by now had developed a bomb originally to use against Germany, but the Germans surrendered before we could get it done. And we had this bomb that had cost us $2 billion to develop. And President Truman is going to make the decision to drop eventually 2 of these atomic bombs. They're dropped in August, and this is going to lead to what becomes known as VJ Day. The other one is VE, Victory in Europe, okay, in May 1945. Ironically, my sister was born about 3 weeks after that surrender. And then VJ Day is Victory in Japan. Had we not had the atomic bomb, many people believe that war might have dragged on for another year or 2. But we'll talk more about that later. All right, 2 presidents that you guys need to know. All right, first of all, our president that we had during the Great Depression, during the New Deal, remember? Now, just think about it, y'all. He comes to power in 1933, okay? He dies in April 1945. He is president for 12 years. Y'all could have literally, y'all, had him as your president when y'all were in 1st grade. And then when you graduated as a senior, he had just passed away. That's how long he was in there. And had he not died of that cerebral stroke or whatever it was that he had, He was elected, y'all, to another term. He could have literally been your president through college, too. Imagine that kind of length of time. I mean, to many people, he was almost like a father figure. Now, so he's president for almost all of the war, except for the very last month in Europe and the last few months of the war in Japan, okay, or in the Pacific. Now, I say he gradually got Americans ready for the war. You'll probably hear me do this comparison again, but this is the way I see us getting into the war. Y'all ever, like, done your bath, got your bathtub all filled up with water, and you put your foot in it? It's like, oh, man, that's hot, right? What do? Take your foot out, you get out, right? Maybe you put some cold water in. Maybe you just let some time pass by. Then what do? Put that foot back in again. Maybe this time it goes a little bit further. All right? Then you do it maybe a third time, maybe a fourth time, and finally you put your butt down and you are in the water. That's kind of how World War II was for us, y'all. He would have us just kind of put our foot in a little bit. He would see how Americans felt about it. And if Americans didn't like that, pull back. If Americans accepted it, hey, maybe get us in a little bit more. But gradually, y'all, like a hot bath, he got us used to getting into this war, okay? Now, you'll see the video here, and you'll see it probably at another time. This is when he asked for a declaration of war after Pearl Harbor was attacked on December 7th. So this is December 8th, the next day.
In infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked
The date that shall live in
by
infamy.
naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
Planes were coming in, torpedoes were exploding against the sides of warships. Planes were coming in.
And then you'll see, these are some clips, y'all, from the movie Tora, 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 and I'll show you some of those scenes probably on Friday. All right, the other president y'all need to know is President Harry Truman. Now, if you've come to my after-school sessions when I was talking about the Civil Rights Movement, I've mentioned Harry Truman because it is he who desegregated the military. Truman was an old veteran himself, even though he was a Southerner and had a lot of Southern, probably racist beliefs at the time. It is he who breaks up, or basically desegregates the Army and lets black men serve alongside white men over there. It took a while to get done, but he does it. He is president himself for 8 years. Well, 7 years, actually. The thing is, y'all, he had not, I'm sorry my picture is blocking President Truman there. But anyway, President Truman had been vice president, of course, and that's how he became president. But he'd been a last-minute selection. Roosevelt had had another man, Henry Wallace, as his vice president. But Wallace, y'all, was a little too pro-Soviet, a little too sympathetic to the Soviets. And so Roosevelt dumps the vice president. I mean, this would be like Biden, y'all, if he dumped Kamala Harris and has somebody else run with him this time. Not that I think that would happen, but it was kind of a shock to a lot of people that somebody who'd been his vice president gets dumped. So Truman comes in as vice president in January 1945. In April, just 3 months later, y'all, Roosevelt has this stroke and he becomes president. He had barely even met the president, y'all, and they didn't even share a lot of information with him. For example, he did not know that we were working on atomic bombs. So they have to let him know that like day one when he becomes president. And it is going to be on his shoulders that the decision to drop the atomic bomb will have to be. Now, he always said it wasn't a hard decision, right? I have a hard time imagining that you could just make a decision that's probably going to cost 50,000, 100,000 people's lives. But when we get to it, because there's a whole section where I talk about this, and it's very important for AP purposes, we'll talk about why he decided to drop it, but also some other considerations, because AP likes you to know that, things aren't always black and white. The more history you study, the more you see there's some gray area in between things that you and I thought were right or wrong. and we'll look at some of the other factors going into his decision to drop the atomic bomb. He also will be our leader during the early Cold War. Now, it doesn't take long, after World War II for our alliance with the Soviet Union to come to an end. And he is going to very ably lead us, I should say, not leave us, but lead us in the Cold War. He's going to make the decision when the city of Berlin is cut off, y'all, to have an airlift to help the people of West Berlin. He's going to make the decision to do the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe. He's going to make the decision to go into NATO. And when North Korea invades South Korea in June of 1950, he's going to make the decision to go ahead and to send troops to protect South Korea and to liberate it. So, two really, really important presidents for y'all to know. All right, now we got a couple generals and we have an admiral to know, because I will be referring to these people and it will be useful for y'all to know their names if you have to do any writing. One of them, and I know it's kind of small up here on the screen, his name is Dwight Eisenhower. Eisenhower was a German name, basically means like iron worker or whatever, but everybody called him Ike because it's a whole lot easier to say Ike. And when he runs for president, y'all, in 1953, he has one of the best slogans ever, which is, "I like Ike," okay? Now, we'll learn more about him when I talk about the 50s here, probably at the end of next week or beginning of the week after that. He will be president of the United States, but before that, he was the overall general, y'all, in charge of the whole European theater. In other words, all the operations in Europe. Now, he wasn't just commander, y'all, of U.S. forces. He was commander of Allied forces. He was in command of the British, the Canadians, the Australians, the New Zealanders, the Free French, all of those people. And what was so good about it, because, there might be generals who maybe were better strategists or whatever, but you know what he could do? He could work with people. I mean, I don't know if y'all have friends like that they're friends with everybody. You're like, man, that person hates me. I can't talk to them or whatever. Or I hate that person. Nobody hated him. He could get along with everybody, and he knew how to work with people to make he knew how to stroke their egos, right? To make them all feel important enough. And that's really important when you're dealing with, the British, who are very proud people, and the French, who are very proud people, even a lot of generals who were often very, very selfish or very, very needy. He knew how to work with them. So it was really easy for him to use that to become president. Now, he is probably most famous for planning the Normandy invasion. That is the invasion, D-Day. Like I said, you guys will see a scene from Private Ryan to plan this invasion of France. That was on him. Had it failed, his career would have been over. He even wrote, y'all, a letter that he would read to the people just in case it failed. But fortunately for the world, it worked. Later, of course, he's going to be president. For a while, he was president of Columbia University for free. He didn't charge them anything. And then he gets elected in 1952, and he serves until 1961 as our president after Truman. And he's the last president before Kennedy, by the way. Now, we have another general shown here with his famous corn pipe there. And that is General Douglas MacArthur. Now, MacArthur was very, very arrogant. I mean, oh my gosh, y'all. Incredibly brave, okay, but also very, very arrogant. Now, he was in charge of basically the army in the Pacific, the other theater, the other front that we're fighting. So he's in charge of that. Now, the strategy he's going to use is called island hopping. We have a whole slide about that later on. The Japanese, y'all, over several years had taken like every teeny weeny little island in the Pacific. Now, it'd be a waste of time and men and resources to take every one of those islands. So very carefully, y'all, they planned which islands were important enough to take, and then they hopped over the others and left them to be kind of strangled or to be starved out. And that's called island hopping. Now, perhaps his most famous moment happened in the Philippines. Now, a weird kind of thing. And I don't know if you guys remember when we talked about in the Great Depression, the bonus army. But the bonus army, y'all, it was General MacArthur that sent troops in to clear out those veterans who were asking for a bonus in World War II. I mean, from World War I. And the man who was working as his aide, his assistant, was no other than Eisenhower, right? So these men had a long history. But after quite a few years of service, he decided to retire. And then, y'all, he went to the Philippines. Now, he had been stationed there. His father had been stationed there. In fact, I think he and his father are the only two people to have won, father and son, to have won Congressional Medals of Honor. I might be wrong on that. But anyway, he goes back to the Philippines, and they hire him basically as their generalissimo, their officer to basically defend the Philippines because they were worried about a possible Japanese attack. And sure enough, it comes. And I got to say, at first, he didn't do a very good job. Just like the guys at Pearl Harbor were kind of blindsided and the Air Force and ships wiped out on the ground, a lot of the Air Force was wiped out on the ground in the Philippines. Now, his men fight bravely, but ultimately, he will have to flee the Philippines. And we couldn't dare let him get captured. That would be too much of a morale boost or propaganda victory for the Japanese. So we smuggled him off the island. But before he left, he told the Filipino people, I shall return, okay? And indeed, about 3 years later, as he's making his way back across the Pacific, he does go into the Philippines, and guess what he said? People of the Philippines, I have returned. Pretty brilliant, right? He will also be our general at the beginning of the Korean War. And he does this amazing attack from behind. We had been pushed nearly off the Korean Peninsula. And instead of fighting from there and fighting back, he lands troops at a place called Incheon. And then the enemy has to retreat. He pushes the North Koreans all the way up to the border with China. The Chinese warn us, dude, you're getting too close, getting too close. And he's like, China won't dare attack us. Well, guess what? In November 1950, the Chinese do just that. They attack us and drive us back. And then he also starts criticizing President Truman. And reluctantly, President Truman has to fire the guy. So he has a history as well after World War II. Chester Nimitz, I have a lot of respect for because he's a good old Texas boy, right? Chester Nimitz came from Fredericksburg, which is west of Austin. Beautiful place out there, y'all. Wineries, museums, all kinds of neat things if you ever can get out there. The picture you see up there is his parents' hotel. They kind of had their own hotel. And it's just hard to imagine a boy basically from the desert out there in West Texas or Midwest Texas wanting to be in the Navy, but he did. And he was one of the most successful we ever had. His greatest victory is the Battle of Midway. Now, Midway, y'all, was an incredible victory. In fact, that's the title of a book about it by Walter Lord. But Midway, y'all, was the tide turner. It changed. It was the turning point of World War II in the Pacific. The Americans sank 4 Japanese carriers only for the loss of one of ours. And in fact, y'all, we had to end up sinking that one. It was just so badly damaged, but it just wouldn't sink. And this revenged Pearl Harbor, and ultimately, historians have decided it was Midway where we realized we're going to win this war. We were losing up to that point, but now it's just a matter of time that we win this war. And we'll talk about Midway in some more detail. Now, the next general I'm going to talk about is General Patton. And I'm going to show you guys a couple little videos from Patton. I want to apologize in advance for the language, but Patton was very salty. I don't mean he used salty. I mean he used salty language, not salty like bitter. This guy made cussing into an art, okay? He had dyslexia, we think, as a young man, but he overcame it through really hard work, went to West Point, managed to graduate through there, and he was sort of a father of armored attack using tanks. And in fact, America's longest serving tank ever that we had, the Patton tank, was named in his honor. Okay, lasted from like 1945 and variations until like 1990 or 80s or so. But in 1970-71, when I was a little kid, I remember going to see this movie with my father. And I was kind of shocked by the language, but to my father, Patton was just basically, you know, he was like a hero for my father. And so I'm going to show you some clips from it, and you'll get sort of a feel for what this guy was like. Once again, I apologize for any bad language that may come up, but y'all are adults. Oh, he's nicknamed Old Blood and Guts, okay, because, you know, he's an old guy, and he was willing to shed blood and guts. You'll hear that in the trailer here in just a sec. And probably his greatest victory is going to be at what's called the Battle of the Bulge. Now, as the Americans were making their way across France and into Belgium, Hitler launched one last big counterattack, kind of throwing everything in. His goal was to split the Americans and the British. What he ended up doing was just making a big bulge in the line. It was up to Patton, y'all, to move his Third Army, redirect it, and to cut off the bulge and to relieve the men in Bastogne. Now, y'all may not believe this, but Mr. D is a veteran of the Battle of the Bulge. I have a picture here to prove it. Yeah, the Battle of the Bulge. Mr. D always fighting it. And it's a losing battle right now, let me tell you. No, that's not me. I think I'm worse than that poor guy. Yeah, but Battle of the Bulge, right there. So anyway, here's a couple clips from the movie, okay? I think I'm